In 1988, Forbes magazine listed one of America's largest family fortunes, the Strohs of Detroit, brewers, worth $700 million. Their beer was in every gas station in America. The family had survived the Civil War, Prohibition, and the Great Depression. 30 relatives shared the wealth of a company that had brewed continuously in the same city under the same name for 138 years. 20 years later, there was nothing left, not a diminished fortune. Nothing. The last family check stopped in 2008. Forbes went back and did the arithmetic. If the Strohs had simply put their 1988 wealth in an index fund and gone fishing, they'd have been worth about $9 billion. Instead, they hold a different record. In the magazine's words, how to blow $9 billion. This is the newest story we've ever told on this channel. No Gilded Age, no marble palaces, a beer, a city, and 3 business decisions. It could happen to any family business in America. It's probably happening to one right now. Here's the machine of this story. The Stroh fortune wasn't spent on castles or gambled at casinos. It was lost at the office by honest, hard-working men making 3 understandable decisions. They borrowed 5 times their company's worth to buy a rival at the top of the market. They tried to fight 2 giants with a fraction of their firepower. And through it all, they kept paying every family member a guaranteed salary from a business that was bleeding. Any one of those, a company survives. All 3, compounding for 20 years, and a 150-year empire dissolved so completely that the family's last asset was a half-empty office building in Detroit. Watch the sequence, because unlike the Vanderbilts, there's no vice to blame here, only arithmetic. Bernhard Stroh arrived in Detroit in 1850, a 28-year-old German immigrant fleeing the failed revolutions of Europe, carrying about $150 and his family's beer recipe. The Strohs had brewed at a family inn back in Kern since the 1700s. In Detroit, he started at the absolute bottom, brewing in a basement and selling the beer door to door with a wheelbarrow. He had one advantage, the beer itself, light, crisp Bohemian Pilsner. The style had only been invented in Pilsen 8 years earlier, and America had never tasted anything like it. Detroit drank it. The wheelbarrow became a wagon, the wagon a brewery, and the brewery a Detroit institution that grew with the city itself. His son Julius added the signature. After touring Europe's great breweries, he brought home a method almost no American brewer used: fire brewing, direct flame under copper kettles instead of steam. Whether the flame actually changed the taste, connoisseurs still argue. It didn't matter. Fire brewed went on every label, and for a century, it meant this beer is made the old way, by people who care. Then came the test that killed half of American brewing: Prohibition. 13 dry years. The Stroh's answer was pure immigrant pragmatism. If we can't sell beer, we'll sell everything around it. Near beer, birch beer, soft drinks, malt extract, ice, and ice cream. Stroh's ice cream became such a Detroit staple that it outlived the beer itself. When repeal came in 1933, the Strohs fired up the kettles and picked up exactly where they'd left off. A family that could survive Prohibition, Detroit believed, could survive anything. And you have to understand what Strohs meant to Detroit, because the 2 stories are the same story. This was the working man's beer in the ultimate working man's city, brewed a few miles from the assembly lines, drunk in the union halls, sponsor of the ball games, employer of thousands. When the auto industry boomed, Strohs boomed. The company and the city had grown up together for a century, and the family's identity was welded to both. Keep that in mind for everything that follows, because half the decisions that killed the fortune were, at bottom, refusals to abandon Detroit, made in the exact years Detroit was being abandoned by everyone else. By 1980, Stroh's was a strong regional brewer, beloved, profitable, and small. And that was suddenly a death sentence. The American beer industry was consolidating into a war of giants, Anheuser-Busch and Miller, backed by national advertising budgets that regional brewers couldn't imagine. The math was brutal. Get big enough to fight them or be eaten. Peter Stroh, Princeton-educated, thoughtful, universally respected, chose to fight. In 1981, he bought New York's F&M Schaefer Brewing. And in 1982, he made the bet that defines this story. Strohs, a company worth about $100 million, borrowed roughly $500 million to swallow the Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company, a fallen giant several times its size. The minnow ate the whale. Overnight, Strohs became the third largest brewer in the United States. Detroit celebrated. The family had made it to the big leagues. Here's what the celebration missed. Third place in a two-horse race is not a market position, it's a target. And the $500 million of debt meant Strohs had bought a seat at the Giants' table, with nothing left to bet. Anheuser-Busch and Miller were about to unleash the most expensive marketing war in consumer history. Super Bowl ads, celebrity campaigns, the light beer revolution. Strohs, servicing its debt, couldn't answer. They largely missed light beer entirely, the single biggest shift in the industry in a generation. The company was now big enough to need national advertising and too indebted to afford it. That's not a strategy, that's a countdown. The 90s were one long controlled retreat. Market share drained year after year toward Bud Light and Miller Lite. Peter Stroh, hunting for a way out, diversified some $400 million into biotech ventures and Detroit real estate, including Stroh River Place, a gleaming riverfront development in a city that was itself collapsing. Both bets were far outside anything the family knew how to run, and both lost more millions. It's one of the saddest details in the story. The family kept faith with Detroit, kept its headquarters, kept investing in the city, while Detroit and the fortune sank together. Loyalty, it turns out, is not a business model. Meanwhile, inside the family, the machine that had always worked kept running: dividends. In the 80s, each member of the fourth generation drew over $400,000 a year, regardless of how the company performed. 30 shareholders, guaranteed payouts from a business fighting for its life. And because the family refused to sell shares to outsiders or take the company public, control was sacred. There was no outside capital, no outside discipline, and no one at the table whose job was to say, "The checks have to stop." In 1985 came the moment that told Detroit how the story would end. The company shut its own brewery, the ancestral plant on Gratiot Avenue, where fire had met copper since the Civil War. It was the rational call. The plant was old, the debt was strangling, capacity was cheaper elsewhere. But the symbolism was merciless. The family that had refused to leave Detroit could no longer afford to brew its own beer in it. The name stayed on the label. The fire under the kettles in the city that made the name went out, and 14 years of decline still lay ahead. In 1996, one last double down. Strohs bought the bankrupt G. Heilemann Brewing Company for nearly $300 million. An industry analyst summarized the deal in 4 words that should be taught in business schools: 2 sick chickens. 3 years later, it was over. In February 1999, 149 years after Bernhard's wheelbarrow, the family announced the sale of everything. The brands were split between Pabst and Miller for about $350 million. Most of it went straight to the banks and to a fund for employee pensions. That, at least, the family funded. What remained went into a family trust that, in Forbes' words, dribbled out shrinking checks until 2008, when it was completely tapped. Eric Stroh, of the fourth generation, died in 2009, shortly after learning the quarterly checks would stop entirely. Was there a villain? Look closely, because this is the part that matters. Peter Stroh wasn't a fool or a playboy. He was a serious, decent executive making the consensus call: consolidate or die. The dividends weren't theft, they were tradition, the same checks the family had always paid. Staying private wasn't greed, it was 130 years of identity. Every single decision was defensible, and together they were fatal. That's the Stroh lesson, and it's colder than any story we've told. A fortune can be destroyed entirely by reasonable people making defensible decisions, if those decisions all point the same direction: more debt, more obligation, less flexibility. The Vanderbilts died of excess. The Strohs died of commitments to a deal, to a city, to 30 relatives' lifestyles, to an identity as brewers when the market had stopped paying for it. Excess you can quit. Commitments quit you. And the $9 billion? That's the number that should keep every family business owner awake. It's what doing nothing was worth. The index fund asked no loyalty, paid no dividends to cousins, and fought no beer wars. Sometimes the most profitable decision in business is the one that feels like surrender. Frances Stroh, of the fifth generation, wrote the memoir that lets us see inside. It's called, perfectly, Beer Money. Her father Eric, as the fortune dissolved, filled the void by collecting guitars, guns, and 80 Leica cameras, boxes of them unopened, while the checks shrank. Addiction moved through the family as the money left it. Her brother didn't survive it. Her inheritance, she wrote, arrived mostly as objects to be sold. She spent years as executor auctioning her father's collections, a fifth-generation heiress liquidating the residue of Detroit's proudest name. The brewery on Gratiot Avenue closed in 1985 and was eventually demolished. The family name survives in Detroit today mainly on an ice cream, the Prohibition sideline that outlived the empire it once rescued. Right now, somewhere in America, a third-generation family business is holding the meeting. Borrow big and buy the rival, or stay small and get squeezed. The heirs expect their distributions. Going public feels like betrayal. Every option looks like the responsible one. The Strohs are what it looks like when that meeting goes wrong slowly. No scandal, no crash, just 20 years of defensible decisions compounding downward, while the checks keep arriving right up until the quarter they don't. Beer money, it turns out, is like any other money. It doesn't care how long your family has made it. It only cares what you do next. Every fortune ends the same way. The only question is how long it takes. Subscribe. The next story is already turning to dust.